everyone. We'll get started. Today we're calling to order. Oh, I need to do the roll call. Commissioner Cameron.
Good morning, everyone. I am here.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Good morning. I'm here.
Commissioner Hill.
Good morning and present.
And we're all set, Vivian, with the four of us. Thank you. And we'll get started with public meeting number 357, calling to order at just after 10 a.m. And somebody is really ringing the doorbell. But we want to get right to the minutes. Commissioner O'Brien, you shifted on. Good morning, April 8th.
Good morning. Yes, Madam Chair, I move that the Commission approve the meeting minutes from April 8th, 2021, subject to any necessary changes for typographical errors or other non-material matters.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussions or edits? Everyone had a chance to look at. I just wanted to, I did note, Director Wells, that Commissioner Zuniga brought up the good idea of the wonderful presentations that we're receiving from the team to be put into a SharePoint. I think many of those do end up in our Commissioner's SharePoint, but something maybe for Crystal to help us with. You know, we get such wonderful PowerPoints, and sometimes they're harder for us to retrieve through our email, and they would be PDFs, correct, Commissioner O'Brien? So they would be static, and we
Right.
So it was a good reminder on the minutes that we just should follow up with that. So, for instance, that was, if you remember, Monica's finance PowerPoint. So that would be one of those wonderful treasures to keep in a SharePoint.
Just to clarify, you're talking about the ones that we have done in the public meetings, or the ones we did for onboarding Commissioner Hill?
Well, no, those would, I think, have been shared with the commissioners, but I'm thinking more when we get these wonderful presentations. I think that's what we were speaking about on this April 3rd meeting. Monica's wonderful PowerPoint. I'm thinking of Todd, Caitlin's on the tribal litigation matter, just all those treasures, so that when we want to refer to them, they're really readily available.
Okay.
And it might be a little bit separate from our other commission PowerPoint, where it's all of our agenda and all of this, just kind of clutter free. Does that sound, that's doable, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, it was a good reminder for the minutes. Thanks. With that said, excellent. No edits, no discussion. Then we'll take a vote. Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
Oh, I probably should have had you abstain. Yeah.
Abstain.
Fine. We'll note the abstention. My apologies. I set you up inappropriately there. And then I say aye. So we have our three with one abstention, and that's sufficient, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Anything else, Commissioner O'Brien?
No, that was it.
Okay. Then we'll move on to your update, Executive Director Wells, please.
Yeah, for item 3A, I'm going to turn it over to Loretta and Bruce to give you an update on the on-site casino operations and what's been going on there.
Hi, thanks, Karen. Good morning again, Chair and Commissioners. Since our last update 2 weeks ago, things have continued to go well. The properties are continuing their enhanced cleaning protocols. At MGM continues to implement and enforce the citywide mask mandate for indoor public places. There have been no significant issues with that. Compliance has been okay on the MGM side, as well as on the patron side. MGM has wrapped up its outdoor free music, the Friday night series that it did over the summer. That was a successful offering for them, and they will be bringing it into one of their ballrooms starting the middle of this month on the 15th. And MGM is hosting their first pieces of conference-style business in their convention area at the end of this month. MGM, like the other two licensees as well, hiring has continued to be a theme, and MGM held another large hiring event a week ago today. I've been informed that they were able to make job offers to 60 people. That is a successful event. And of course, we on the licensing and IEB side are seeing a steady group of hires amongst all three coming through the licensing and then the background reviews. Plain Ridge has also been actively recruiting and hiring. At this point, they are still hiring for Fluties overall. They report that they're getting the staff that they need. The culinary side does, the food and beverage side does remain their bigger challenge. They have several initiatives in place to resolve the issue, including increasing their starting wages. They don't have an opening date for Fluties yet, but they are working towards that. And at Encore, operations are continuing. They did host the Department of Public Health on 2 days in 2 informational workshops for their employees on September 27th and September 28th. They chose times that would hit the most employees, depending on shifts. I think the times were 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. The event was staged near the employee cafeteria, and DPH was available to ask questions about the vaccine. The overall goal was to increase vaccine amongst the employee population there. So really, those are the significant matters that I have for you this morning. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. I know that Bruce is on the call and that he has some items for you as well.
Questions for Director Lilios at this time?
Just a comment. Good news that they're able to hire the staff they need. I know your last report said that was really a challenge. So that's really good news to 60 jobs at MGM and Plain Ridge on the verge of reopening Fluties. So it's a good report. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chair. My report is Encore is in the process of changing all the carpets in the high limit area. They're removing the 2 smaller food trucks down by the escalator. PPC is kind of remains the same since the last report 2 weeks ago. And the big announcement is MGM will be opening up their poker room on October 29th. So that's been a subject since probably last March with this. So that will be good to see. Any questions or anything?
Questions? How many tables, Bruce, do you know?
I don't know initially. It's not going to be the same amount that they initially had, but my guess would be probably around 10 tables initially. They have hired a poker manager and are slowly bringing on staff. So now I know they have 1 table on the floor right now, but they're slowly bringing them back in.
To Commissioner Cameron's point before, it'd be really interesting to note how many additional staff come on with poker. That's good news.
I'll bring that information back with me for the next meeting.
Excellent. Commissioners, questions for Bruce? All set? Okay, thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Karen?
Okay, thank you. Next, item 3B is the internal reopening plan update. So the November 1st date where we are reopening our Boston offices for staff, not to the public, but for staff, that is coming up in just over 3 weeks. So we met yesterday with the entire working group. I am meeting with managers this afternoon to review and the form to distribute to the staff for hybrid work requests. I have sent that to the managers just now, and we'll meet this afternoon to make sure everyone's on the same page about communicating that to staff and make sure everyone understands what the process is and the policy that the commission approved. We have reviewed by the by department at the working group, sort of the equipment situation. I think we're in pretty good shape there. Managers will coordinate for their own teams about what equipment they need and what's going to work in this hybrid mode. The team is working on a plan for coordinating with staff members about returning some of their equipment to the office that they've been using at home that they may need in their offices. So we're going to work out a plan and a schedule. You know, everybody can't show up on, you know, at 9 o'clock right at the front door with all their equipment. We're going to have something very efficient. So I think the first week back, there's going to be sort of a transition period where we're, you know, scheduling returns and getting used to it. I mentioned at the last meeting that we'll be doing some training beforehand about using the OWL and being able to do hybrid meetings internally in the office. If someone's remote and there's, say, 3 people in the office and 1 person's remote, how do you do that? How do you make that comfortable for the people that are in the office and still have the remote person participate? I'm expecting to try to schedule a town hall for the week of the 18th. That's basically Boston-based for the return to the office, just to communicate with the entire team. The entire staff will be invited to that. You know, if folks that are not located in Boston want to opt out, that's fine. It's up to them if they want to attend. And then the other update is our vaccine verification process has been extremely successful. That worked out very well. There are an extremely small number of requests for exemptions. The forms for those requests were sent out. HR and legal worked with outside counsel on that, and we'll be getting that information back. And then once that information is back, we can determine some kind of resolution to those requests. So I'll keep commissioners updated. But we're actually in very good shape. We had a very successful program there. Any questions?
Questions, Commissioner? All set. Excellent report.
Okay, we're in good shape. Thank you. And thank you to the staff for all the help on this. This is a big project.
And thank you to Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Cameron for your work on the working group. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of work for you and for the whole team, so thank you. I can't believe November 1st is coming up. Where before I was having a hard time imagining November 1st would ever arrive, so here we are. And we're moving on, right? Karen, all set to item number 4. Good morning. Good morning, Director Vanderlinden. Hi, Mark.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Jetstein. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm joined today by Dr. Rachel Holberg, as you know, from UMass and our Sigma project, as well as Marie-Claire Flores-Peugeot, our research manager. So, as you know, the MGC gaming research agenda has now been underway for 8+ years. We've amassed a number of reports and really valuable information that is intended to inform our work as well as others' work. It covers the areas of social research, economic research, public safety, program evaluation, and community and several community-driven research projects. So in order to maximize this research and the findings that we have, a couple of years ago, we finished actually about 18 months ago, we finished a strategic plan for the research agenda. A key piece of this strategic plan was to develop the capacity to more widely share the research findings. And what that means is, how do we take this really valuable research that we have and translate it into ways that make sense to people? Lay terms in some cases. In some cases, it perhaps has more depth to it. But the key point is, what do we do in order to tailor our research so that it gets to the right people and it strikes the right tone? And today is really, I think, our first stab at taking what we know is an invaluable piece of research that has been created by Dr. Holberg and her team, and translating that into to recommendations that will mean something. Now, please understand, this is really our first real intentional effort at doing this, where it's coming from the Gaming Commission. And so we will continue to revise this over time, but I do feel that it is going back and really striking what the intention of the Expanded Gaming Act was and the purpose of the research agenda. And it certainly fulfills a key piece of the research strategic plan, which, by the way, was adopted by the Public Health Trust Fund Executive Committee, as well as it was presented to the Commission. Now, Magic was, as you know, it's the Massachusetts Gambling Impact Cohort. This was a study that took place over about a 6-year period, following the same group of individuals to better understand their gambling behavior. And with that information, it's really intended to really understand the etiology. How did problem gambling develop? How did the at-risk gambling develop? I'm going to ask Rachel Goldberg to dive a little bit further into the study's objectives and goals. And then after that, I will turn it over. Marie Claire and I will do a short presentation on a 2-page document that we created, as well as and cover the findings and recommendations. So with that, Dr. Volberg, do you want to pick this up?
Good morning, everyone. Mark, I sent you a text a few minutes ago to let you know that I'm having connectivity problems with my computer.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that you and Marie Claire have a copy of my slides ready to share with the commissioners while I read from my notes pages.
I have that ready, Rachel. I can share my screen.
Thank you so much, Marie Claire.
Can everyone, is it working?
Okay, that looks like my first slide. Thank you very much. Not a really strong start to my day, but I will persevere. So I'm going to just share a few very high-level overview details about the MAGIC study, and then turn you back over to Mark and Marie Claire. So next slide, please. In addition to authorizing casinos in Massachusetts, the Expanded Gaming Act is unique in the United States in requiring the Gaming Commission to establish a robust research agenda as laid out in Section 71 of the statute. The research agenda has 3 important components, including research to understand the social and economic effects of casinos in Massachusetts, a baseline study of problem gambling and existing prevention and treatment programs, and independent studies on a variety of topics, including the etiology or natural course of the disorder. As you've heard, in 2013, the Gaming Commission selected our research team at the University of Massachusetts Amherst to carry out the first 2 elements of the research agenda. In October 2013, the Gaming Commission, with the unanimous support of the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, recommended to the legislature that a longitudinal cohort study be added to the MGC's research agenda. And in April 2014, the Gaming Commission again selected our research team to conduct an etiological study of gambling and problem gambling in Massachusetts. I do want to mention that although the study was approved in April of 2014, it did not actually begin until December of that year because of the casino referendum that was on the ballot in November. Next slide, please. I want to highlight some key aspects of the longitudinal cohort study in Massachusetts from an international perspective. This study is the first large-scale gambling cohort study ever conducted in the United States. The introduction of casinos during the course of the study means that it provided an opportunity to better understand the relationship between gambling availability and problem gambling. Now, between us, Rob Williams and I were closely involved in all of the 5 prior large-scale gambling cohort studies carried out internationally in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Sweden. We were able to apply lessons learned in these other studies in conducting the study in Massachusetts. Magic builds on these prior studies, and it ultimately included all variables found to be significantly related to problem gambling in all prior longitudinal and cross-sectional research. Next slide. This slide presents the overall goals of the Magic study. And I just want to digress a little bit here. It's important to understand that cross-sectional prevalence studies, pre-posed or at various intervals, do not really tell you anything about the dynamics underlying a prevalence rate of problem gambling, for example. A stable prevalence rate over 2 periods of time can either represent continuity of those problems in the same individuals or a rate of remission equivalent to the rate of new cases. And these 2 scenarios have very different implications for the mix of services needed to minimize and mitigate gambling problems. My final slide, the next one, yep. This slide presents some information about the 5 waves of the study. So after we learned that there was going to be a cohort study started in 2015, we selected a sample of 4,860 individuals from the baseline general population survey that we conducted in 2013. We heavily over-selected for at-risk characteristics since we knew from experience that this would allow us to observe many more changes in problem gambling status than were observed in other gambling cohort studies that had been done internationally. Because we had not expected to do a cohort study in Massachusetts so soon after the baseline survey, the first 2 assessments were relatively short, but the latter 3 assessments were quite comprehensive. And as you can see, we were able to retain a very substantial proportion of the original 3,139 members of the cohort over the entire 6-year period of the study. And now I will turn it over to Mark and Marie Claire.
Thank you for the next presentation. Good morning, Chair Commissioners. Thank you, Dr. Goldberg, for the overview on Magic. Now I'll be talking a little bit about some of the key findings from the study, and then Mark will be presenting some of the recommendations that were from these research findings. So one of the things that this study did was categorize people into 4 different categories, depending on their gambling behavior. So there were the non-gambler, recreational gambler, at risk, and problem gambler. And the goal was to determine the stability and movement of people between these behavior groups. And so what the study found was that the most stable group was the recreational gamblers. The recreational gambler is someone who would gamble for entertainment, recreationally. And so the large majority of the recreational gamblers stayed recreational gamblers. The second most stable group was the non-gambler group. For this study, a non-gambler was considered someone who hasn't gambled in the last 12 months. And so the majority of non-gamblers in one wave stayed non-gamblers in the next wave. For those that did transition, the majority transitioned to recreational gambling. An even less stable group was the group of problem gamblers. So a problem gambler is someone, for this study, someone who is experiencing impaired control of their gambling behavior and is experiencing some gambling harms, some harms related to gambling. And the majority of problem gamblers transition to at risk or recreational gambling in the next wave. And a noteworthy finding is that in the last wave, over 75% of problem gamblers were relapsed problem gamblers. Now, the least stable group was the group of at-risk gamblers. So at-risk gambler would be someone who would be spending more than they intend or spend more time gambling that they intended. And the minority of this group stayed in this category in the next wave. Most of them transitioned to recreational gambling, almost half of them, and a significant percentage of at-risk gamblers became problem gamblers during the next study. This was around 1 in 5. So what these findings are telling us is that there is an instability of gambling behavior, and this provides an opportunity to influence people at different points of the gambling journey through targeted prevention, treatment, and policies. Another objective of the study was to look at the predictors of problem gambling and recovery. And so for problem gambling, so lotteries and sports betting were found to be 2 types of gambling that are predictors for problem gambling. In terms of demographic, it was found that being male and having a lower household income was also a predictor. There are more demographics that are predicted for problem gambling, but they're outside the scope of this study. So here we're just focusing on the magic findings. In terms of comorbidities, it was found that having a higher number of significant property or financial life events in the last 12 months, having problems with alcohol or drugs, and having lower levels of happiness were also predictors for problem gambling. And in terms of behavioral, having rating higher importance of gambling as a recreational activity, as well as higher impulsivity, higher score on psychopathy, antisociality, and having higher false beliefs about gambling were also predictors of problem gambling. In terms of recovery, no prior lifetime problems with gambling was a predictor for recovery. Having less severe problem gambling, so that means lower problem gambling scores, lower gambling expenditure, and this is really where prevention can be tied in, and how important it is to have early interventions to really prior for people to be moving down the gambling continuum. And so a program like GameSense is really key for this example. In terms of comorbidities, it was found that having fewer comorbidities, so less impulsivity, absence of behavioral addiction, no illegal activity, no mental disorders, and significant life events of any kind were also predictors for recovery, as well as fewer false beliefs about gambling. And so all of these predictors and knowing the indicators that predict problem gambling and recovery can really help support the development of effective prevention, treatment, and policies to support player health. And now I'll pass it on to Mark to talk a little bit about the recommendations based on these findings.
Great. Marie-Claire, would you mind just driving the slide deck for me, please? Great, thank you. So I'm going to, based upon these findings that Marie-Claire just reviewed with you, there are several recommendations or considerations that we derive from that. I'm going to break it down by prevention, treatment, and policy, recognizing that there is actually, it's not nice, neat categories. There is actually overlap between these 3 areas. But first, starting with prevention. So a lot of the considerations were developed from the findings and the predictors of problem gambling. So the first is to promote educational efforts supporting player health with a particular focus on demographics, location, and content. We can be much more specific when we think about the development of these types of educational materials, knowing who we're talking to where they should be located or where they should be directed towards, and what the content is. And so speaking specifically of the content, the educational effort should focus on countering false beliefs about gambling, the risk factors associated with problem gambling, lower risk gambling guidelines. So another effort that we currently have underway, or we're just starting, is the lower risk gambling guidelines. And those focus on providing direction to players on gambling expenditure, number of forms gambling, and frequency of gambling. We should also offer play management systems to monitor in real time gambling. And as you know, this is something like Play My Way, but it may also include such things as setting a time limit or setting a win limit. And so I think that while we're on the right track with Play My Way, there are findings from this study that should cause us to pause and think about what other directions we can go with that. And then also, we kind of related back to the top, delivering information that supports informed decision-making by gambler type. Who are we talking to? Let's be as specific as we can when we're thinking about who our audience is. And so it's different for a recreational gambler than it is for a problem gambler. The tone of the message is different, and the type of information that would be shared is different. Next slide, please. So in terms of treatment, let's see, improving pathways to encourage people to access treatment. So for an example of that is a warm handoff. And a warm handoff would be something like a caller to the helpline would be transferred directly to a treatment provider. Another would be, because of the etiological connection, effective treatment and substance abuse. So because of the etiological connection to substance abuse and mental health, we would also want to make sure that we integrate information about problem gambling into those specific settings. So, for example, that would mean that substance abuse or mental health clinicians are also cross-trained to really understand the nature and course of problem gambling. Providing screening for problem gamblers when, I'm sorry, I just covered that. Supporting culturally appropriate services, and that includes appropriate languages. So, for example, and this is related to the MAGIC study, but it is also related to some of the other types of community-driven research we have, assuring that where treatment services are located, the types of treatment, linguistically appropriate, that those services are readily available. And improving pathways to encourage people to access treatment. This means that we open the door as wide as possible in order to create pathways for people to access treatment. I think in terms of GameSense, that would mean that we make sure that GameSense advisors have the latest information on what treatment is available within the communities, what culturally appropriate treatment is available, and so that opens that pathway towards treatment a little wider. These are some of the examples that we should be considering when we think about how do we provide and make sure that treatment is readily accessible. Next slide, please. And finally, on policy, limiting gambling advertising and the availability, especially in low socioeconomic neighborhoods. I recognize that this is maybe difficult to achieve or to wrap our arms around in terms of policy, but if we know that individuals in lower socioeconomic groups, or there are specific groups that are at greater risk, we should take a look at what factors may exist within the community that we can have an influence over. We should promote player pre-commitment for player reward card holders. Again, this goes back to something like Play My Way, although as we move down that road, thinking more broadly. Requiring casino employee training on problem and responsible gaming. This is pretty widely available in Massachusetts at this point, and I think the findings from this study really reinforce that for us. Promoting the availability of voluntary self-exclusion. We have almost 1,000 people on the voluntary self-exclusion list at this time. And that is without, I think, the full extent of how we can promote that program. Both promote it widely to the general population, but also specifically within other treatment settings where something like a voluntary self-exclusion program may be a nice part of a treatment plan for somebody who is accessing mental health or substance abuse treatment. Next is cooling off periods. So our voluntary self-exclusion program offers something as short as a 1-year period and as long as lifetime. But I think that the findings for this, recognizing that people move quickly between these different gambling types, should cause us to think about whether or not a cooling off period shorter than a duration of 6 months may be something that would be worthwhile for us to pursue. The next two are related, improving access to ATM exclusions and restricting access to ATM in venues. We have a requirement in Massachusetts that ATM machines are not on the gaming floor. In fact, it states that they can't be located any closer than 15 feet to the gaming floor. Recognizing that we have, I think the findings would suggest that perhaps we want to offer greater flexibility in the types of controls that players can implement for themselves, including something like an ATM exclusion. This is available. It's not regulated by the Gaming Commission, but I think that we can do a better job of promoting the availability of something like an ATM exclusion, which is a program offered by the ATM companies that have ATMs at the properties. Promoting the availability of credit suspension. This is also an offering at each of the casinos that I think that we can do a better job of promoting, and again, with the intention that it provides a greater range of options. Automated alerts or other interventions for when players' gambling behavior escalates. So there is growing technology and I think a better technology that allows for this type of intervention to be delivered to players. It's most widely available in online settings, though I think that we could possibly see this moving over into brick and mortar casinos. Regardless, I think that it's the type of technology that we should continue to explore in order to support players. Rewarding responsible gambling on player rewards cards. I think that this is something, I don't have a specific example of how we could do this, but I think that we have a good relationship with our licensees, and perhaps it's something that we could consider exploring with them, how we could implement specific measures that would satisfy this. And then finally, serving alcoholic beverages responsibly. There are rules and regulations that are in place that would encourage this, and I would like to just reinforce that those are really important to be in place at Massachusetts casinos. Next slide. So, questions?
Thanks, Mark. I think the policy slide is an important one to perhaps keep up, although I'm inclined to always take down the PowerPoint. So I leave it to folks. I think if you have it in your own, if you have access to that slide, commissioners, I would take it down. Do most people have access to that? Yeah, okay, good. I'm seeing everybody's nodding their head. Great. Questions for Mark and Marie Claire. First off, thank you to Dr. Volberg. The work has been no short of remarkable. Commissioner Hill, you remember the impetus for this, and I'm sure you're going to note that. But thank you, and we will circle. Throughout our questioning, we want to remember that Dr. Volberg is available for our questions as well. So, questions, Commissioner Cameron.
Yes. First of all, and this may be for a lesson learned from those other jurisdictions around the world, but those retention rates are really remarkable. And that, seen a lot of studies, and I don't see retention rates that high. So whatever you're doing to keep those folks engaged, it's really, it really adds value here, I think, with that many people staying engaged in the study. The question I had, though, was more to do with the chart we showed on the 4 categories, the at-risk, the problem, the recreational, and the non-gambler. Although we talk about instability with that chart, most of that instability was positive, correct? I mean, the only negative really was that group who moved from at risk to problem. So that's certainly a concern. But, the stability around moving from, maybe even a non-gambler to a recreational, I don't look at that as a negative. And those who move from at risk down to a recreational, really good news, right? And those who move from problem gaming down to at risk is pretty good news too. So I just think those are good results here, and it probably is all the work we do, whether it be Play My Way and all of the other work that's being done out there, I think probably contributes to that. But am I missing something, or is that good news, that chart, for the most part?
Rachel, do you want to take a first stab at that?
Sure, yeah. It definitely is good news to see, that people, for the most part, transition to a less severe category. I will say that transitioning from being a non-gambler to a recreational gambler is actually very easy because all it takes is purchasing a lottery ticket, for example, or, going to a casino one time in the past year. The group that I think, or the piece that we were most interested in terms of the problem gamblers and the at-risk gamblers that we saw moving back and forth, is that one of the main predictors of developing a gambling problem or becoming a problem gambler in any given wave was having been a problem gambler in a previous wave. And so what we seem to have in Massachusetts is a fairly substantial group, if you will, of people who are vulnerable because they've had a gambling problem in the past. And so I think in Massachusetts, in contrast to some of the other international jurisdictions, what we have is sort of a larger proportion of people who are not first time or early onset problem gamblers. We have more of a population of people who've had difficulties in the past and then develop difficulties again. And that requires a somewhat different mix of messaging, of prevention and treatment to sort of be able to address both of those kinds of problem onset.
And if I think that there's a prevention lesson in there, and I think that there's a treatment lesson in there, and really understanding that fact. It should inform what our strategies are, for example, in game sense, recognizing that a person who is a problem gambler can move down that continuum and then perhaps even back up again. And same with treatment, by the way,
Right.
to understand that movement.
Great, thank you. And just a real follow-up to that. Was the team surprised by any of this? And maybe that was the one thing that was not anticipated, was this moving down the continuum, and then maybe, or those who were at risk in the past before casinos were even here. But was there anything surprising about this to the team?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I was a little surprised. I of course I would recognize that there would be instability within the groups, but I think the extent of that instability was surprising to me, and honestly gave me some hope that we have this tremendous window of opportunity to work with players to deliver the right information at the right time, or there's multiple windows of opportunity, I guess I should say. So yeah, I was surprised by that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Great report.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Hill, there you go.
First of all, the study, very informative and very impressive. And if anything I've learned over the last few weeks of becoming a commissioner is that this is really a priority of the commission and the workers under the commission who are dealing with gambling addictions. One thing I'd like to touch upon that I saw in the public health recommendations, and something that I feel very strongly about, and hoping maybe you can touch upon it a little bit more, is the connection between the mental health and those with gambling addictions. And as we move forward with the report, because I think the report gives us a very good framework and a roadmap to the commission and to the staff to help people with problem gambling. But I know that mental health is a very big piece of this, and it's an expensive piece to this in regards to trying to help these individuals, either as a state or individually. So can you just touch upon a little bit of that, of mental health piece, and how we would move forward in helping those individuals?
Sure. Commissioner Hill, as you know, I mean, the mental health system is complex, and it's really can be really confusing. I think understanding that mental health clinicians largely have a specific kind of range of practice and specialties. They may be, some are more general than others, some may be incredibly focused. Recognizing that there is quality training, clinical training, to talk about gambling disorders, which is a DSM, a clinical diagnosis of gambling disorder. Recognizing that there are quality trainings out there, and perhaps increasing the number of those trainings, increasing incentives for mental health clinicians to access that type of training. I think that it would make a lot of sense to kind of help mental health clinicians generally, in the mental health system more broadly, increase their capacity to understand and treat this, recognizing that the comorbidity between a gambling disorder and other mental health disorders is incredibly high. In some cases, I've seen over 90% comorbidity between, if you have a gambling disorder, some other mental health disorder is also at play.
I didn't know if the doctor wanted to add something to that.
Go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so the one thing that I wanted to add is that in mental health settings, there is an effort generally to identify all of the presenting problems that someone comes in with. But if you're not screening for a gambling problem, and you don't pick up on the fact that the person before you who's presenting with depression or with an alcohol problem also has a gambling problem, that issue will not be addressed in the treatment plan, and can very significantly affect the ability of that person to recover from the presenting problem as well as a gambling problem. And so there's a tremendous opportunity, I think, when we think about adding screening for gambling problems into a mental health clinical setting, there's an opportunity to actually have much more effective treatment because you're addressing that additional problem that the person might not be willing to discuss.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Rachel. That really does tie well with what I had said too, that there needs to be broader availability of screening, but once you do the screening and somebody that comes back positive or comes back indicating that there's the presence of gambling harm, having the capacity to work with that individual and know kind of the scope of what you're working with.
Yeah.
I know it was a loaded question and something we could talk about for hours on end, which I don't intend on doing. But I would also add that I share with Commissioner Cameron that the results, I think, at the beginning of the presentation were very impressive. And I'd like to think it's because of all the very hard work and the programs like Game Sense that have been put into place. You know, as we were meeting yesterday, I found out that we're like one of the top in the nation, once again, in regards to helping those with gaming or gambling addictions. And I just want to applaud and thank the staff and all the organizations that are working together to make this happen, because I know this was something that was so important to so many people at the beginning of the gaming industry. So I'll just leave it with that and say thank you and a great job and a great report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner, I don't think it was such a loaded question. Certainly, Mark has raised the intersection of our work with respect to mental health and substance abuse disorders in the past. I think you're prompting something along the line, possibility of additional research to support perhaps work with Department of Public Health or with a medical facility in a pilot program. Mark and Marie Claire and Dr. Goldberg are really imaginative. There's some opportunities there that we could think about. Of course, the priorities need to be established by Mark and team, right? But there are some opportunities there, and it's so important. And right now, there's such good awareness of the need for mental health resources. So time might be perfect, right?
If I started my career in sort of understanding gambling disorders as a clinical supervisor at a substance abuse treatment agency, not in Massachusetts, trying to figure out how to include or integrate the capacity for those clinicians to provide problem gambling treatment. Over the years, I've recognized it's not one or the other. It needs to be both, and it needs to be integrated. And acute understanding of the nature of the issue and how it interplays with the individual only provides better treatment, regardless of what the focus of the treatment is. You want to meet the individual's needs, and sometimes it extends far beyond what the original presenting problem is.
Dr. Goldberg, are you leaning in?
No, I was leaning in to agree with Mark. That it really is an issue of people are complex entities, and they turn up for treatment for something, but it's almost inevitable that a whole host of other issues are going to come up, and it is really vital to the success of that person's treatment to be able to see that whole person.
Yeah. Well said.
So can I just ask a question of
yes, Commissioner.
The prevention options that you sort of were in the slide? When you talk about locations, you reference school-based programs, which intrigued me because obviously they can't go in the casinos until they're 21 or older here. They can go to some other jurisdictions nearby at 18. Is the concept to go into, colleges and junior colleges, or are you talking about going into secondary locations to basically let people know about gambling and gambling addictions and risks and stuff starting in, say, high school? Or what's the parameters of that?
Yeah, well, I think college and secondary high school prevention I don't believe GameSense would be the appropriate entity, especially in a high school setting, but I think that there are a number of curriculums and programs that focus on that specific demographic with evidence-based prevention programs that should be considered. As a side note, we also have provided funding to in Springfield for their youth health survey that's administered to 8th, 10th, and 12th graders to have an understanding of gambling behavior and possibly problem gambling within that age group. I don't have the findings directly in front of me, but I think that we want to understand what is the nature of the problem in those settings as well. And I think that the prevention programs are exactly that. How do we provide prevention there? So once they turn 21 and head to the casino, they're either choosing to gamble, it's recreationally and not moving down the
I'd be curious to see what the results of that study are, actually, if you can get it to me at some point.
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm excited to dive more into that data as well.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Byrne, did you have any other questions right now?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Hill, do you have other questions? Okay, so I just had it first off. Great report. Mark, in the past, I don't know if it was in a public meeting here, and perhaps it was with another presentation with Dr. Volberg that was more global. There were some stakeholders who suggested that they were surprised that the magic research ended after the 6-year period, that there was a thought that it might have extended longer. I think it's probably, am I right about that first? And if so, could you just explain how because Commissioner Cameron did point out that the retention rate of the cohort was remarkable, but can you just explain, how it came to be 6 years, just so that we have that recorded?
Sure. It's largely the contract ran the extent of the course that it could run without procuring that contract. The end of that also happened to coincide with the launching of the follow-up general population survey, which is another very large project that is currently out in the field right now. So it's huge in scope and huge in budget. So in terms of saying, well, let's just re-procure that in order to continue that cohort, wasn't feasible at the time. I think that there's also an argument that cohorts at a certain time also perhaps run their course, in that you want to refresh a cohort. So I don't think the commission should take it completely off the table that we would follow a similar sort of course with the follow-up general population participants as we did with the baseline general population participants, in that we comprise the cohort from the general population survey participants, making sure that it was enriched with persons who were at risk or problem gamblers. We could perhaps do the same following the completion of the follow-up general population survey. So I agree the timing wasn't great. It just wasn't great, but for a variety of different reasons, that study needed to terminate when it did.
Great, thank you. So we can stay tuned as you continue to work out your research agenda and present to both GPAC and us, that perhaps that would come back in a different form of some sort.
I agree. I would be very interested in the GPAC's advice, and certainly, and of course, all of our commissioners.
Yeah, oh yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And then I also applaud that, that you have focused on educational efforts, and also was going to ask about the school-based program, because that caught my eye as well. I have one sort of question about another alternative, and then I just thought maybe we should talk, commissioners, about what to do with Mark's policy list in terms of guidance down the road. So if you could be thinking about next steps with respect to those ideas, but One question I had that I didn't see, I might have missed. Are there programs available or something that could be in the education realm for? We have a lot of interventions to help the gambler while they're gambling. I'm wondering about financial. I'm not sure what the words would be. Financial education, financial interventions for those problem gamblers who are in dire straits. That somehow they have access to go and help with credit, reestablish their credit, as well as using all the interventions on their problem gambling. But I wondered if there was an opportunity there to work with financial institutions or something along the line.
Yes.
Yeah, I would love to. I think that this is a great question that as we talk with our partners at like DPH or others about financial literacy. Gambling, as we know, is driven by money, and most of the time, by the time somebody is in need of help, their financial situation is devastating. And so the idea of integrating financial literacy or financial support, especially linking it with a clinical intervention, makes perfect sense. And I think, and there are examples. I wish I could say more about Massachusetts specifically, but certainly this is a fairly common practice.
And Mark, I know we touched on that a little bit, reaching out to the regulators of the banking institutions in Massachusetts, but also the treasurer does have a financial literacy program. So, there are some ways that maybe we could integrate our work and across other departments and other offices. So
that's right. That's true.
Yeah. So again, we could pile on so many ideas, and so I understand that at a certain point you have to prioritize, and that's kind of my sort of the nexus to the policy page. Commissioners, there's a lot of great ideas. At the top of the list, I see limit gambling advertising. In my tenure, we really haven't visited advertising. Commissioner Cameron, Commissioner O'Brien, I don't know if you can provide some historic, knowledge on that issue, but it certainly comes up, and it comes up in our research, right? So I don't know if we should be thinking about that. That was at the top of the list, and there's so many that I don't know how we can give some guidance to Mark and team. Ideas? Commissioner Cameron or Commissioner O'Brien? Commissioner Hill? Commissioner Hill.
Well, as the new person, I need to digest these policy recommendations. A couple of them, the advertising, I know, again, was a big issue that I think we need to take a look at maybe, but I'd like to see a little bit more information on each policy that we've been given before I could make any, any educated decisions on or comments on.
Great. Commissioner Cameron?
Yeah, the one area of advertising we did get involved with was up at MGM because they wanted an interactive advertising very close to the main thoroughfare there, and so we did get involved with that, and they without us having to vote or anything else, they dropped their plans to do that. But what we haven't had, and I'm wondering how we could gather this information, is reports to the commission of inflammatory advertising, something that really is harmful, whether it be to young people or those, in the kinds of neighborhoods. I mean, I know there's some on buses, but we haven't, I don't know if there's a way to collect that information so it could come to us and we would have information to act on, but we haven't had that come to us. Mark, do you gather some of that information?
We haven't gathered that information. We've
Or
heard
it hasn't been reported to you. I didn't mean you actively. Okay. So,
Can I say, you know, we've integrated guidance within the responsible gaming framework on casino advertising, and by and large, the casino industry follows guidance that was set out by the American Gaming Association. It's not as if there isn't anything that it's a void out there. But I think that there's interesting information from this study that should say, okay, that we have some general information that's out there. And by the way, our guidance in the responsible gaming framework largely follows the American Gaming Association. So we have some general guidance there. Is it time that we consider something that would be more specific in either guidance or concrete direction?
get this. This may be an issue when it comes to sports betting, because that's the advertising that's really prevalent out there. Is the sports betting advertising that is happening now, right here in the Commonwealth, even though it's not legal.
I think that there's definitely some lessons to be learned from other jurisdictions in sports wagering advertising, and I've heard of a whistle-to-whistle ban on sports advertising as an example of something that's being done. But as we head down that path, it's something that I think should be really closely considered.
To that point, it might be. Sorry, go right ahead, Commissioner. Go ahead.
I said it's funny that you should bring up the advertising. Last night when we were watching the baseball game, DraftKings was on every single inning down in the right-hand corner, and they pushed it and pushed it and pushed it every single inning that we watched that game last night.
I think, and then it might be helpful, Mark and Karen, if maybe we put on the agenda some to educate us about the guidance that is provided and any regulatory provisions that we do have on this, and think forward on advertising. I know that I believe it was Mark, perhaps the Asian report did signal that they felt that community might get more, might be inundated with more advertising than other communities. So I'd be interested in any data to Gail's point that's in those reports. And I know we're going to hear the Asian Cares report shortly too. So It might be just good timing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I think that it's always great when you have several different reports or studies to draw upon.
Okay, thanks. To Commissioner Hill's point, all the other points that are below, I think we all look and sort of understand where that policy recommendation may come from, but we need more information. I agree with him. I guess perhaps we want to take your lead, Mark, on how to prioritize those and what could be done and how you would, if you would recommend immediate implementation, what your timetable would be on those. Okay. Commissioner O'Brien, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that policy list or ideas on how we might approach it.
Well, what I was going to basically suggest was in that line of asking Mark and Marie-Claire, if you even prioritize the top 5 impactful or easiest to implement, and then came up with sort of the real world recommendations that would flow from these sort of general policy bullets, that would be a more fruitful conversation, I think, in terms of what, if anything, we're going to do in terms of changing regulations or policy.
Well, we can absolutely do that. Interestingly, we had a gaming research advisory committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, and doing that type of prioritization came up. It's really hard to prioritize, so we may draw upon each of you to help us with that work as well. It's hard to prioritize when you see a list of important policy recommendations, it's hard to prioritize. But I think looking at, what level of effort and greatest impact can certainly help us guide us in the direction. That's
a great way of thinking about it. I'd like to just also note that the last bullet, it does say serve alcoholic beverages responsibly. In my tenure, I do feel that the commission does monitor and regulate the distribution of alcoholic beverages very, very carefully. So if someone were to see that bullet without context, it might suggest that we see a lot of irresponsible delivery of alcoholic beverages. Commissioners, I don't want to speak for you, but my tenure suggests that we see, and we've corrected when there have been any kind of oversight. Now I see that Bruce is available, Bruce Band, but he and his team monitor that, of course, very carefully. Commissioner O'Brien, do you want to weigh in on that?
No, I had the same thought, just that maybe if it had said continue to serve responsibly probably reflects more accurately. I do feel like this commission, before I got here and since I've been here, takes that very, very seriously and has done a really good job, even through the pandemic, trying to figure out how to give them what they wanted for their business model, but do it in a responsible way.
Certainly, we can take a look at that. And when I was saying it, when I was presenting it, I do recognize that there is a training program that's in place. There are standards in place. We have regulations in this area, and perhaps it was reinforcing that those are really important measures to have in place. So we can take a look at that wording too.
Commissioner Cameron, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. I'm not aware of any other commission that in a quarterly report, these casino operators have to tell us how many minors were able to enter the floor, how many of them were able to access alcohol or illegal gambling. So they are very well aware how important it is to this commission, those issues. So I'm just not aware of anywhere else where they are asked and they have to account for those numbers and give us what they did to remediate. So I do think we've taken it very seriously.
We have another report that's in the works right now, that's in the pipeline by Christopher Bruce, taking a look at connections between casinos and drunken driving incidents. And so certainly we hope that everything that we're saying here is reinforced by that. We'll have some additional data points to take a look at too.
Commissioner Hill, you'll get familiar with, you've already seen some quarterly reports, I know, in catching up, but what we really do monitor is the minors being served. So we also, our gaming agents under Bruce's leadership really monitor, and as does the GEU, over-serving. So that's just a really important part of the forensics. So I think we've, I've made my point. I'm really and have been impressed by the past commission's work and the ongoing work on that. But I also am impressed by the licensee's response and cooperation around it. So, any other questions on this? Such a good report.
Thank you.
All set, Brad.
I just want to thank Marie Claire. Since coming on board, we've had a couple of different projects that we've worked on that I think really help distill and make sense of some really complex research projects.
You know what? The translation is there. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And Dr. Volberg, very much appreciated your setting the stage. It was really clear for me, and I'm sure for my fellow commissioners, it was just very nicely done. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. If we have no further questions, we'll move on then to item number 5. All set then. So this is Derek. There you are. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I recognize that with the departure of Commissioner Zuniga, and as I mentioned before, we will, though he's departed, we are going to bring him back for proper acknowledgement and vetting, well, at least virtually. He had been appointed as the commissioner who would serve as treasurer for the commission. And so I checked in with Derek as to what the impact of that absence meant for him. So Derek, do you want to just set up this requirement, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Section 3F of Chapter 23K requires the Commission to annually elect one of its members to serve as a secretary and one of its members to serve as a treasurer. Section 3F goes on in detail to outline the requirements of the secretary, but the requirements for the treasurer don't come up until Section 3J. 3I, and the main piece of that is it says no funds shall be transferred by the commission without the approval of the commission and the signatures of the chief financial and accounting officer and the treasurer. So for every payment we make, the treasurer has to approve it. So it's somewhat of a weekly role. It could be daily if the treasurer wanted to do the same role as I have. But under the former treasurer, what we did is we set up a weekly meeting where we would review every single invoice that's going to be paid that week. It happens Tuesdays at noon. It gets moved around. Usually takes half if people can't make it, so we can be flexible. And it usually takes about half an hour. We run down every single invoice. The division directors already have to approve it. We go through when it came in, who it's for, the dollar amount, and then if there are any questions, we answer them then. By Friday, by Friday, we submit all those into MARS, and then the Massachusetts Management Accounting and Reporting System, our accounting system. And then the following week, we send the report to the treasurer to show everything that was paid, and that treasurer signs off on that final report. Now, I've gone over, we can do it so that after every single workflow, like with me, I have to sign off on every single invoice and the treasurer would sign off on it. Our former treasurer did not want to do that, wanted to just attend the meetings and then get the final report to verify that what happened at the meeting is what actually hit the accounting system. That's our current process. Like we said, we can be flexible for whoever takes over this role. But the main thing is, and Enrique was really into the budgeting process, took the role a lot deeper than the requirements of the statute, but the basic requirements of the statute are the sign off of the payments, every single payment that gets done.
So as you can see, there is by statute a built-in additional internal control or redundancy that's really important for Derek's protection as well. That might have been something the commission would have instituted by regulation, but the statute, the legislature thought about it in advance. So we need this role to be filled. We also know that we have there'll be at some point a new commissioner appointed by the treasurer. It's my understanding the statute doesn't require the treasurer's appointee do that work. My suggestion is that we fill this role, not as interim because it is the appointment, but that we could revisit it once we have a fifth commissioner. And I'd like to recommend that Gail take this on, and she is, I understand, willing because one, she has such historic knowledge. She knows about what the budget's been for an awful long time. And of course, with her past experience, has significant administrative and finance budgeting experience as a former lieutenant colonel. So that would be my recommendation. And unless Commissioner Hill or Commissioner O'Brien think otherwise, we would simply have to vote her into that. But I want to invite discussion. Commissioner.
I think it's an excellent choice.
Great choice.
Okay, so to do, and Commissioner Cameron, it's a great choice, but it's also an additional big responsibility. So thank you. If, we want to do this right, but on the record, you've agreed that this will work for your schedule, correct?
It will, and I'm happy to serve. I have been impressed from day one with the way we have put together our budgeting, as well as the redundancies that were put in place. So I'll be happy to serve in that capacity.
Great. So I will need a motion to make it official.
Madam Chair, I move the commission appoint Commissioner Gail Cameron as treasurer of the commission in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 23K, Section 3F.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Cameron.
I'll abstain from the vote and just rely on my colleagues to move forward with this.
I had to start with you, and I knew that would be your answer. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
And I vote yes. Three yeses, Vivian, and one abstention. Thank you. And Derek, thank you for creating a system that we can really rely on. So all around, thanks.
Thank you. We look forward to working with you, Commissioner Cameron. Thank you.
I as well. Thank you.
All right.
Good. Now, on our agenda setting, or the time estimates that Crystal provided for us, she suggested maybe we have a break now. Does that make sense to have a, yes. Okay. I'm seeing thumbs up for, how about it's 11:22 is like 11:30, that's 11:32, 10-minute break. Sound good? Okay. And then we'll be back for Joe's report. Thank you, everyone. And I am not going to leave the meeting. That's the thing I've been worried about. But Austin, we're all set. Okay. Thank you so much. See you in 10 minutes. I think we're all set, Austin. If you want to take down the screen, thank you. Oh, Commissioner O'Brien is still, we're just waiting for a few more. There you are, thank you. We'll just do a roll call. Commissioner Cameron?
I'm here.
Commissioner O'Brien?
I am here.
Commissioner Hill?
Present.
We're all set to reconvene today's meeting. And now we're turning to Chief Delaney, please. Do I see? There you are,
Yes.
Joe. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So we have a few items up for you today. The first one are some reappointments for the local Community Mitigation Advisory Committees. So there are several positions on these committees that are appointed by the Commission, and those need to be appointed annually. And so it's that time of the year to do that. In your packets, you have a memo that gives you all of the bios of the various folks, but I'll just run through them very quickly. These are all people who have served on these committees for a number of years and have all agreed to serve for an additional year. So, you know, having these folks on has been great, and we hope that they can certainly continue to be on the commission, on the committees. So for the Region A Local Community Mitigation Advisory Committee, we have Vincent Panzini. He's the Chamber of Commerce representative. We also have David Bancroft, who is the Regional Economic Development Organization representative. He works with Mass Development. And we have Myra Negron Rivera, who is a human service provider. Within Region B, we have Allison Ebner, who is the Chamber of Commerce representative, and Ellen Potashnik, a human service provider. And those folks we are recommending for reappointment for another year.
Joe, do you have any vacancies that you're still seeking, or does this fill all of your committees?
No, on the local community mitigation advisory committees in Region A, we need a human service provider position that's not filled. And in Region B, there's an opening for the Regional Economic Development Organization and for a human service provider. So we've been working with those folks trying to identify some people to fill those positions.
It might make sense for you to circulate to the commissioners those vacancies too, because they may have some ideas for you as well. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. We'll take input from anybody we can get it from.
That's what I thought, Joe. Thanks. And Mary's got a big smile on her face too. So just a reminder of what the vacancies are for, and that it's the two different regions. So in terms of the Region A and Region B, we need to take action. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if the vote has divided the regions, commissioners, but you do need formal action on this. Is there any discussion on Region A? Any questions for Chief Delaney? Commissioner Cameron? And no questions?
No
on
questions. All of them are very well qualified.
Yeah, I think we can also say we very much appreciate their public service. Really important input. So, and then any questions with respect to those nominated for Region B? Okay, then do I have a motion? Commissioner Hill?
I would move that the commission reappoint Vincent Panzini, David Bancroft, and Myra Negron Rivera to the Region A Local Community Mitigation Advisory Committee, and that it reappoint Allison Ebner and Ellen Potashnik to the Region B Advisory Committee, all for a term of 1 year.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. No discussion, questions? Great. Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
And I vote yes. Thank you, 4-0. Next, Joe.
Okay, the next item that we have up is the Community Mitigation Advisory Subcommittee. We have been working with the governor's office to try to identify a number of appointments for that subcommittee. But the one critical one that we need right at the moment is a commission representative. Bruce Stebbins had been in that role, and then followed by Enrique. So we now have that vacancy there. And why I say it's critical is that right now, the membership that we have in the subcommittee is one short of a quorum. And this position gives us exactly a quorum so we can actually hold the meetings.
Great. I would recommend that Commissioner Hill take over that position. As we've already said, we're inviting him to work with Chief Delaney. It's a great way for him to become very well acquainted across all our divisions, because Joe and Mary convened such a cross-departmental working group. And of course, Commissioner Hill brings such extensive knowledge on the municipal side with his municipal background and of course his extensive legislative background. So I would love to see him fill that role. Commissioners, what do you think?
I think it's an excellent recommendation, and I'm happy to make a motion if Commissioner O'Brien agrees.
I absolutely do.
So I move that the commission appoint Commissioner Hill to the subcommittee on community mitigation as the commission's representative in accordance with Chapter 23K, Section 68B.
Second.
Great. No further discussion. Chief Delaney, that will solve at least an immediate quorum issue. Thank you. Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Abstain.
And I vote yes. 3 yeses and 1 abstention. Thank you, Commissioner Hill, for taking that on. And I know that you're going to really enjoy the work as well. So thank you.
Welcome aboard, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. So the third item that we have up for you, we're very excited about this item. The Department of Conservation and Recreation has approached us to repurpose some earlier granted community mitigation fund monies in order for them to complete the design of the Mystic River pedestrian and bicycle bridge. So before, and that the request is for an amount of $650,000, which will allow them to complete the design of a bridge across the Mystic River. So before I dive into the nuts and bolts of it, I want to do a couple of things. I'm just going to share with you one second here. Unshare that.
So Joe, we saw the map. But are you looking for the diagram?
Is that everybody seeing the map up there? Okay.
Yes.
Just a little lay of the land here. So on the peninsula here is where Encore Boston Harbor is, and Mystic River, Alfred Street leading into Sullivan Square, I-93 going up north. And you'll see here is the Assembly Square T station. What the proposal is, and you do have a copy of this in your or in your packet. The notion here is to bring a bridge from this point across the Mystic River This is the railroad bridge on the Newburyport line. Bridge would come over here, pass under this and into what's known as Draw 7 Park, which is a state park that's in Somerville. And then in doing so, that would connect a number of different, all these green lines you see here are all the various bike paths and other things. There are multiple pedestrian bicycle trails here that would connect together. And in addition, this would create a direct connection over here where people would be able to get to the Assembly T station. So it's clearly a project that will connect, will create a lot of connectivity between the casino and other uses and allow folks to get to the casino without having to get in vehicles, which is one of the things we're very, very interested in. So what I wanted to also do here is just set the stage a little bit. This project has quite a lot of history, and I think it makes sense to spend probably 10 minutes going through that history on how we got to where we are today. So back when the Encore project was going through MEPA review, one of the requirements of their Section 61 findings was to provide $250,000 to DCR to do a study on the feasibility, essentially, of a pedestrian and bicycle bridge across the Mystic River. Now, once things got rolling with the design and construction of Encore, we met with DCR and with Encore and discussed this project. And DCR agreed that it probably made sense for Encore to actually do the study themselves rather than turning money over to DCR, where we'd have to go through public bidding rules and all of that, that it would be able to happen in a much more timely fashion if Encore did that work themselves. So, so they did that, and a group of stakeholders was identified, of which the Gaming Commission was one of those stakeholders, and we met a number of times looking at alternatives and so on. Now, at the same time that was going on, DCR was doing some design work on Draw 7 Park, and excuse me, they have plans to reconstruct Draw 7 Park into a multi-use kind of athletic field and other uses there. So obviously DCR was a critical stakeholder as well. So once that study was complete, Encore at that point decided that they really wanted to move ahead with this bridge. They thought the notion of this was great, and that it all made sense to do that. Now, what had happened was, we talked about two pieces here. One is the bridge across the river, and then the second piece of it was a connection from Draw 7 Park into the Assembly T station. Now, between Draw 7 Park and the Assembly T station, there's several sets of railroad tracks. There's the Orange Line, there's the Haverhill Line, and essentially a bridge would need to be built over those tracks down into Draw 7 Park in order to get direct access into the T station. So Encore at that time said, hey, we'll build the bridge if somebody else builds the connection into the T station, which seemed to be a good idea of kind of a public-private partnership. Encore would be footing, probably 3/4 of the bill, and then about 1/4 of the bill might go towards this connector into the Assembly Station. So now, again, at that time, Somerville and Everett realized that it was really in their interest to pursue this connection into the T station. And they applied to the Community Mitigation Fund for a grant to start that design. And in the interim, we also gave them a second grant to complete that design. There's actually is one typo in your memo. We said that the total amount of those grants was $850,000. It was actually $825,000. So now, as Encore proceeded with the design of and the permitting of the pedestrian bridge and the bicycle bridge, the estimated cost started rising, and Encore at that point reevaluated the construction of the bridge. They looked at other alternatives and so on. And At that time, they were looking also at doing an aerial tram across the river, kind of like a ski lift type of thing. And in looking at that, they realized that would be much more cost effective to move ahead with a project like that, rather than just doing the pedestrian bridge. So so they decided to not do the pedestrian bridge, at which point we had nothing that would connect the, so this work that Everett and Somerville was doing on the bridge connecting to the T station would no longer be viable because there'd be no actual connection to the casino without a bridge. So at that point, we told Everett and Somerville to stop working on that. And in fact, they had not awarded any contracts or anything. So none of the money had been spent. So once the pandemic hit, everything was kind of off the table. Nobody was really proposing to do anything. But since that time, over the last year or so, we've been in conversations with DCR and MassDOT about the state taking over the building of this bridge. And so we've had a couple of conversations, and their request to us was that, hey, if we could repurpose some of these funds that are sitting idle right now to finish the design of the bridge, we could get this moving ahead and get this project going. And just, as one aside, when the study was going on this bridge, there was a large public meeting that was held over at the Partners Healthcare building over in Assembly Square. And there had to have been, I'd say there had to have been at least 200 people at that meeting. And there was not a single negative word to be said about this bridge. I mean, everybody loved it. Everybody thought it was just the greatest idea, connecting Orange Line to bike paths to the casino to everything. It's just, was really just a home run. So, so when DCR approached us, we said we would certainly work towards that. Now, also in your packets, you will see, we just got these the other day. We had asked Everett and Somerville just to send us letters of support for this application. This technically is a joint application between Everett, Somerville, and DCR, but it was really only signed by DCR. So we just wanted to make sure that the other communities were fully on board with this, and they certainly are. It is their money that we're repurposing for this, so we certainly needed to get their concurrence, and we have that. So, what we're doing here, really, in any evaluation of applications, firstly, we have to look at what is the connection to the casino, or, first, is there a connection to the casino? And then secondly, we have to determine, what is this project design? What impact is it designed to mitigate? And then also we tend to look at knowing that there's probably benefits associated with this project over and above the mitigation of a casino impact. We look at sort of the proportionality. What proportion is our money providing to the overall money that's going into the project? So with respect to a connection to the casino, I think just looking at the proximity of the casino and where the bridge is going to land, I think a reasonable person would say that there is definitely a connection to the casino of this bridge, and that certainly patrons and employees of the casino would use this bridge to get to work or to get to the casino. So I think there's no question that there is a connection to the casino. And then the second item is really, what is this proposal mitigating? Well, again, one of the key considerations on this project was the traffic on Encore, was the traffic that project would generate, and the many measures that Encore had to take to try to get people out of their cars and into another mode of travel. So this connection would certainly help mitigate Encore-related traffic impacts. It's part of a much larger It's really a cornerstone of a regional effort connecting several pieces of local trail networks together. I mean, this will connect the Northern Strand Community Trail, which will make a connection all the way from Somerville to Lynn. The MBTA has recently constructed a new bike path on their property that goes from Draw 7 Park South to Alfred Street. And then DCR's improvements to Draw 7 Park will improve bicycle and pedestrian connections there. And there's also several other projects that are in the works that will connect this whole network of trails together. And then the kind of the proportionality piece of it. This project would provide $650,000 towards the design. Encore has already spent about $2 million towards the design of this project, and they turned those plans over in whole to DCR and said, hey, we're not going to proceed with them. Here you go. So, you know, Encore already spent a significant amount of money on that. This request would wind up being, you know, roughly a quarter of that total design cost. But if you look at the overall cost of the project, at about right now estimated about $35 million, you know, this $650,000 really will leverage up to $35 million in federal and state construction funding. If you look at it in those terms, this investment is less than 2% of the construction cost. So we certainly feel that this contribution of funds towards this project is certainly proportional with respect to what the overall benefit will be and what the benefit will be to the casino itself. Now, the one caveat on all of this was that we originally looked at the pedestrian bridge and the connection to the Orange Line as really a single project. Now with this, right now, we would only be getting the bridge and not the connection to the direct connection into the Orange Line. This still is a bit of a more circuitous route where people could get to the Orange Line, but you know, we were really looking for that direct connection. Now, you know, with that said, you know, given the changed circumstances, given what's happened with the pandemic and so on, you know, we don't want to, you know, let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And I think we're really looking at this now kind of as a phased project. That the first phase is getting a bridge built. Without a bridge, we can never have a connection to the Orange Line in the first place. So our feeling is let's get this money out there to get the bridge built, and then, you know, nothing precludes Everett or Somerville or MassDOT or any other entity or DCR themselves or any other eligible entity from coming back to resurrect that connector into the Orange Line. So, you know, while we would love to see the entire project go all at once, we realize that it's all very expensive and that it may not be within DCR's purview to be doing that at this point in time. So we feel comfortable that that repurposing these funds is appropriate and is certainly within the spirit of the original Community Mitigation Fund applications. And so for those reasons, we are recommending that that the commission approve DCR's request for these funds as outlined in the application. And of course, we will need to enter into an ISA and do grant documents and so on with DCR should the commission approve the project. And with that, I will open it up to comments or questions.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Cameron.
It was nice for you to provide that history. It all came back to me, Joe, about you know, how difficult it is to get projects like this done. I don't have a question. I totally agree with you that this is a great project and certainly worth funding this study by this commission.
Commissioner Hill? Oh, Commissioner Hill, I think you were first. Okay, Commissioner O'Brien. Okay, thank you.
No, I reiterate what Commissioner Cameron said. I remember this. I'm still really curious about that, you know, sky transportation that Encore has. I'd love to see the designs on that one. But I think that if this gets pedestrian and bike traffic connecting over, I do think it's a win-win for everybody. And particularly given the fact that this is already pretty far along in the design stage, it absolutely seems appropriate for us to repurpose the money.
And actually, Kathy, before we go on, I just wanted to mention that Kurt Gertner is here on with us from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. He had been spearheading the putting together of this application and so on. I just wanted to recognize, that he was here. We emailed yesterday. I said it wasn't necessary, but it was great that if he could be here, and if there are any particular questions that he might need to answer, that he'd be available to do that. So thanks, Kurt, for being here.
Commissioner Hill, any questions or comments?
Well, the only comment, I sat with Joe yesterday and he gave me an overview of this, and I was just shocked at how far this bike system could be if we connect this bridge all the way to Lynn, if it's done correctly. So it's quite a project, and something I certainly would be supportive of.
I agree wholeheartedly. It's very exciting, and also really complements a lot of our community mitigation dollars that have already been awarded to help on that bike system. I want to just acknowledge the two letters that we did receive. Joe, you mentioned them, and thank Mayor DeMaria for his letter, and then the Mayor's Office of Strategic Planning and Communities out of Somerville for their letter, very helpful. If there are any questions for Kurt, commissioners, this is the time. I am jealous of wherever he is standing right now, because his backdrop are real leaves and mine are not. Okay, so the only thing I might add, and I don't know about its appropriateness or anything, Joe, but as the project continues and design work perhaps starts to be implemented, to the extent that we as a commission, and this would be something I'd turn to Todd and his colleagues in legal, to the extent that we could write a letter of support for any federal funding, and the commissioners agreed with that, it would just be something that might be nice for us to explore as an option, because I do understand this will require such extensive federal funding, and I think we all understand that this is really a good time for that potential. So it's a great project to connect people. There's just a need for it, and the fact that it can be done in a climate responsible fashion is really exciting. So, Joe, you do need, are there any other questions? Great report, very thorough. Thank you, Mary, too. You need a vote. Do I have a motion?
Certainly, Madam Chair. I move that the Commission approve the Department of Conservation and Recreation's request for a grant of $650,000 to complete the design of the pedestrian bicycle bridge over the Mystic River, as described in the materials included in the Commissioner's packet and as discussed here today. Further move the Commission staff be authorized to execute all necessary grant instruments commemorating the award in accordance with 205 CMR 153.04.
Second.
Thank you. Any further questions or edits on the motion? So the amount is $650,000. Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 4-0. Very exciting. We wish you and all your colleagues well, Kurt.
Appreciate that. My thanks to the commission and staff for the consideration and the affirmative vote here, and we will get started on finishing the design and work toward. I do appreciate the reference to applications. We've already put in an application for a RAISE grant from the federal government for bridge construction, and we look forward to finishing the design and eventually building a bridge across the Mystic. So thank you.
Thank you. Great.
All right, well, that concludes my report.
Okay. Then we're moving on to item number 7. Legal Department, Todd and Carrie. Good morning. Good afternoon. We just shifted.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So we have 3 draft regulations for your review today: 205 CMR 134.01, 134.02, and 134.03 relate to licensing requirements for key gaming employees, and gaming service employees, respectively. You may recall that last year you voted to amend these regulations to allow the licensees to bring in staff from sister properties during emergency situations, which is defined in another section of the regulations and included the COVID-19 pandemic, to assist with training, strategy, and operation, depending on the type of position that the person held, without requiring that they be licensed or registered by the commission. Those staff members would provide their assistance at the Massachusetts properties for a limited time period with the possibility of 1 extension upon approval from the commission. So that was the regulation that you promulgated last year. Since enacting those changes, the IEB has learned that the shared service model that the licensees use would really benefit from broadening this exemption to allow staff from sister properties to assist at the Massachusetts properties for a limited time period for these training and similar purposes, not only during an emergency situation, but at any time upon approval by the IEB. And Director Lilios is here and can answer any questions that you might have about how this exemption has been used to date and the reason for the proposed change at this point. So the drafts in your packet amend each of these sections of the regulation to remove the language that's specifically related to an emergency situation and to allow for this option to be used upon submission of certain outlined information, which stayed the same, and upon approval of the IEB. It would still be for a limited time period of 60 days with the possibility of an extension for up to 6 months upon approval from the commission. So this is the first time you're seeing this change, so we'd be looking for a vote to begin the promulgation process on these regulations. And Director Lilios and I are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner O'Brien. So the question that I have, I remember when we did this during the pandemic, and there was a reason to do it and reactivate it. I guess the one concern I have, the pessimist in me reads this, and what I don't want to see is them bringing in particularly higher level people for recurring periods of up to 6 months, where now you're not having a local person maybe getting a job because they're just, having people come in for 6 month stints here and there. So I am not comfortable with this as is in terms of finding a way, maybe in paragraph 5 or adding a paragraph 6, that puts in the fact that this is really a situational exemption and this is not something to be used to cycle people in and out for periods of up to 6 months. I just don't want to see jobs that could and should be filled by local people basically being this as a stopgap to bring in sister property people from outside the jurisdiction.
And Eileen, if I can jump in, I think language like that would be perfectly welcome by the licensees. This is a provision that is not used often. It's not requested often. But what I've seen makes me think that the requests that we have gotten are quite reasonable. They're things like a new HR system, a new HR IT system is being utilized and it's been implemented in Nevada and wants to be rolled out here in Massachusetts. Makes sense that they should be able to send an experienced person for a time. So I don't expect that language like what you're suggesting would be problematic for the licensees at all. I think it's what IEB has understood from our last time we came before you with this reg. I know we did have the discussion about this is not to undermine employment opportunities in Massachusetts. Right. So if we can come up with that kind of language, perfectly open to that.
Commissioner Cameron.
Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner O'Brien, but the piece of this that also gives me some comfort is IEB can deny if they see some kind of a pattern and it's being misused rather than used very legitimately. They do not have to grant this. So I do think that's a safeguard in itself with the ability to deny something if it's not used appropriately.
I'd like language in there so that we don't have IEB in the position of,
No, I agree with your language.
Having to make that call. I think it's maybe better safeguards and better for IEB to not be the subject of, pleading or cajoling to say, oh, but just one more time. To make it very clear that, even if it's something in, and you cannot apply for the same either position or person more than one time period in a 12-month period or something like that. I mean, I don't know what kind of language you guys can come up with, but that's where my head is in terms of another criterion for this.
We can certainly add language like that and bring it back to you for review. I do just want to point out that just to make sure it's clear, the IEB approval is just for a 60-day period for key gaming and gaming, and then for the 6-month extension, it would come to the commission. The gaming service employees, as written right now, the 6-month extension is through licensing and the IEB, given that those aren't sort of lower line staff, but we could change that as well if you want that to come before the commission also.
I think if the language I'm thinking of is in those regs as we amend them, I don't necessarily think that the gradation of the job would need to change and come before us.
Okay.
Those are my thoughts anyway.
Commissioner O'Brien, could you just offer your language one more time so that I could hear it?
I roughly saying
yeah.
Either as an extension of 5 or as another sub 6 to say, in a no event shall, let's see, how do we phrase it in the beginning?
You're looking at number 5, the commission upon recommendation from the division. Okay, yeah, thanks.
I mean, in a no event shall an exemption under this section be granted to an individual or for a job or for a position. I don't know how you guys refer to them in licensing, position or job or what the term is you use, more than one maximum 6-month period in a 12-month consecutive time period, something to that effect.
And,
so
and that would give the commission guidance.
Right.
Future guidance. It reflects a policy. I understand more clearly now, Eileen. Thank you. Commissioner Hill, do you want to just chime in? No, you're all set. We have had discussions about, as Loretta mentions, that it's really important that this not in any way defeat the goal of creating jobs for the Commonwealth. So I share the same concern. In many ways, I wonder if those jobs should actually be created, that they're talking about and be in the Commonwealth now, instead of saying, well, we'll just bring somebody in for 6 months and cycle them out. I mean, honestly, I feel that way. And we do want those middle manager jobs. The idea, when I believe, and we've got somebody with some legislative history in mind here, it was that this is an economic engine that creates entry-level jobs, really important entry-level jobs, but also launches careers. And I just want to safeguard against that. Loretta, can you remind me if is this a proactive suggestion on your part, or has a licensee come forward? I can't remember that on this.
A licensee did recently come forward, and we were able to grant the extension. And I think it was for, a new HR computer system. And typically, these do not extend for a 6-month period. Typically it's a few visits for some training purposes. But definitely understand the concern. So we were able to fit it in because we still do have the emergency provision, but we were trying to be forward thinking, knowing that fingers crossed, hopefully soon we're, out of a COVID situation, but yet, we may still be getting some of these requests. So we can certainly work with Carrie and Todd on that type of language. Another option for the language, if you wanted to be broader and more policy, would be to put a policy statement in there, as so long as consistent with the employment policy objectives of 23K. But that's a much broader approach, and you may feel more comfortable with the more restrictive guidance.
I actually like both. I mean, I like the idea that we're saying to the licensees, this is absolutely something that's available if you need it, but remember the commitments you made, and then putting a very bright line in terms of what the max usage of it is. We could do both.
I bet they'd be willing also in their quarterly reports to report on if they've used this. It may not be frequently used, and it'll just be,
right.
If they have somebody coming in, if it's somebody for 5 days, maybe not, but somebody who's approaching that 60-day, I think 60 days, pretty generous time to allow for this too. So I don't know. I'm really comfortable with the combination, as Commissioner O'Brien says, and I think we've all noted the policy concern. What do you think, commissioners? Commissioner Hill, you're good. What do you think? You like the combination too, Commissioner Cameron? Why not, right?
I do, just so that they recognize what it is we're trying to get to. We're not trying to, in any way, not allow you to do training or whatever it may be, but we do want you to recognize the bigger policy, objective here.
Yeah. A big training job is a great job to have in Massachusetts. So, anyway, so we need a motion to reflect this discussion, correct, Todd and Carrie?
Were you going to read it and come back to us?
Do we not need it today?
I think we don't need it today. Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can take it and add this language in and then bring it back, and then we would have a vote on the agenda for that meeting.
Okay, perfect. Anything further? What do you think, Karen?
Yes, I remember this from before. I think that works out fine. I think we're just being sort of practical, but still recommending, keep the commission's policy objectives in mind.
Loretta, you're all set then? You think that?
Yep, great.
Okay, excellent. No further discussion on that. Then we are moving on to item number 8. Does anyone have an update? I didn't skip anything, right? Okay. No updates? Okay. No other business. And today's time, 12:16. That's kind of an exciting moment, right? Team, for all of those who contributed today, thank you so much. I do want to just share, and Commissioner Hill, forgive me, you may want to add in, because I am actually I am speaking on your behalf, but you have, I know that you've had conversations with the team yourself, but you've also shared with me how impressed you have been with the preparation and the culture of excellence that this team brings to all the matters that we have to work on. It starts with the top with Karen's leadership, but the team, every division is led with that same purpose in mind. And I also know that the welcome that you've received has been super warm, and you have been positioned well to be able to have a meaningful participation today, and also, of course, make significant contributions from your seat. So thank you. And so thank you to the team, all the time that you've spent onboarding, and also just your continuing work, whether you've had to meet with Commissioner Hill or not. Your work is reflecting that excellence. So thank you, Commissioner Hill.
Oh, it's second to none. The information that I've received and the professionalism that I have seen in this agency, it's really remarkable. And I can't say enough great things about the workers that I've been dealing with, but more importantly, the agency itself, the commissioners who've been so good and so informative, and your experience is phenomenal. And I thank you for always being there when I reach out to you. But the staff is second to none, really.
So with that, Commissioner Hill, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I heard a second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any discussion other than, again, a big thanks? Commissioner O'Brien? I mean, Commissioner Cameron, I'm looking at you, Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 4-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. It's quite beautiful. Hopefully you can get some outside time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.